Hello, my name is Cody. Welcome to Unapologetically Reborn. I'm the co host with the most.
My name is Alicia. So, have you ever looked back at a relationship and realized that you weren't actually in love with the person?
Nope,
No,
no.
but you were in love with who they could become. Maybe you saw their intelligence, their kindness, their talent, their heart, and somewhere along the way, you began building a future around a version of them that didn't actually exist. Remember, potential can be incredibly seductive. So, please don't feel foolish or desperate. Sometimes we don't fall in love with reality, we fall in love with possibility. And possibility can keep us waiting for years. So, today we're going to talk about why we romanticize potential, where it comes from psychologically, why it's especially common among people who grow up in dysfunctional homes, and how to know whether you're loving a person or if you're loving a fantasy. So let's talk about projection, fantasy bonding, breadcrumbing, and the endless dizzying loop of rumination. Whether you're 22 and you're navigating your first chaotic situation in a relationship, or if you're 45 and you're realizing that you've been repeating the same relationship pattern for decades, this episode is for you.
Before we begin, welcome to Unapologetically Reborn. This isn't a podcast about quick fixes, positive thinking, or pretending the past didn't happen. These conversations are designed to challenge the way you understand yourself, your relationships, your nervous system, and the survival strategies that shaped your life. The goal of this podcast is to translate trauma into language that makes sense, so you can better understand your experiences, recognize your patterns, and explore yourself with greater clarity and compassion. This podcast is intended for educational and personal growth purposes. It is not a substitute for therapy, mental health treatment, medical care, or crisis support. If you find yourself becoming emotionally overwhelmed, please consider pausing the episode, practicing self-care, and reaching out to a qualified mental health professional for additional support. Healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about understanding who survival required you to become, and discovering who you are underneath the armor. If you're ready to have honest conversations, ask difficult questions, and explore what it truly means to heal, welcome to Unapologetically Reborn. This is where survival ends, and choices begin.
Working on love lies and the nervous system. And we have a whole bunch of episodes for this, but we are going to finish this up. This is our last take on that one, and then we're going to start a whole new series, which I'm really excited about, actually. So that's awesome. We do have wallpapers now on our website. If you're interested in those, please check those out. Those are all free. We have free resources. Um, just to let you know, we have a different disclaimer, and I don't think it states it in there, but there is a workbook that correlates with this episode. So if you're interested in checking that out, some more resources to kind of look at your situation, you can find that at www.unapologeticallyreborn.com.
And if anybody wants to drop down a comment if you want, if you like the episode, if you don't like the episode, what we can do better, what we can do, just give us some feedback would be great.
Yeah, we're fairly new, so we would appreciate that. Please feel free to also add us on your social media and give us a try. See what you think. Couple episodes.
Yeah.
That would be really appreciated. So let's start off with a story. Let's look at Sarah, who's 34. She made Mark. Mark's funny. He's incredibly smart. When he's on, his charm fills the room. But he has a problem. He hasn't held a stable job in 3 years. He has a lot of excuses, bad bosses, a broken system, an ex who ruined his credit.
The bad boss. I had one of those.
Now, a person looking at reality would see a 35-year-old man with no financial stability and low accountability. But Sarah doesn't see reality. She's a renovator. We'll call her a renovator. She looks at him and she sees a fixer-upper with great bones. She thinks if he just gets a good resume, he'll be a CEO. So Sarah goes to work. She rewrites his resume. She buys him suits for his interviews. She coordinates his calendar, she stops being his partner, and she becomes his unpaid project manager. Here's the tragedy of the renovator: you aren't loving a person, you're managing an investment. And when we love potential, we treat human beings like real estate. We buy the shack because we think that we can build a mansion. But what happens when the other person likes living in the shack? Let's start with how this illusion begins. It starts with two psychological tricks: projection and fantasy bonding. Projection is when you take your own high standards, your capacity to love, and your deep values, and you paint them onto the other person. You're just assuming that they want the same things just because you want them. You're editing their reality. Fantasy bonding is when this happens when you stop connecting to the real human being and you start connecting to the idea of them. You build an entire future in your mind based on a few good dates or a spark of chemistry. You begin to become loyal to a fantasy, not to reality. So let's discuss potential. What do you think?
For the Mark situation, I get being broke and, and having bad boss, been there, done that, but come on now. Try harder. There's indeed for a reason. And for the woman, guys aren't a project. They're still people. You can fix it up all you want. But if he wants to be lazy, he's lazy. You can't paint a prettier picture.
Well, potential can be, it can really trick somebody.
Yeah.
But this right here is reality, and that's what we're looking at today. Potential says they could be amazing. Reality says they missed every important conversation for 6 months. Potential says they could be a wonderful parent. Reality says they haven't shown up for their children. Potential says they have so much more love inside of them. Reality says they don't know how to express it. One exists in the future and one exists in the present. And that's where I think sometimes we get mixed up. So, do you know where the problem starts? Let's pinpoint that. The problem begins when we start making decisions based on future instead of the present. So, why potential? Why does it feel so powerful? That's another important conversation. Potential contains hope. Hope is one of the strongest emotional experiences that human beings can have. Hope tells us maybe tomorrow, maybe next month, maybe after therapy, maybe after recovery, maybe after the stressful season, maybe after they heal, maybe after they realize what they have, maybe after they choose me. Hope allows us to tolerate situations that we otherwise would not. Sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes it's devastating. Children of addiction, let's reuse those again. They learn to live on potential. And a lot of us have come from, various dysfunctional backgrounds. So we live on potential. This is what we're taught. This is what we learn. This is how we survive. When you grow up around addiction, dysfunction, emotional immaturity, or instability, you're often learning to survive by focusing on glimpses, not reality. So in glimpses, you see moments. So when dad is sober, moments, when mom is loving, moments when everything feels normal. You become attached to those moments and you tell yourself, see, they're still here. Maybe they are. But the problem is that your nervous system learns to focus on who people could be instead of who they consistently are. You become a collection of possibilities. So potential is healthy, and it's not always bad. Every human being has potential. The question is whether potential is supported by action. Healthy potential. It sounds like they're making progress. They're, consistent in things. They're responsible. Their actions match their words. Potential becomes dangerous when it's disconnection from their behavior. Were you going to say something?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to say something. The fantasy self. This is also an issue many of us have with this kind of background. So something fascinating, if I could talk, Psychologically, when we fall in love with someone's potential, we're often creating a fantasy version of them. So this fantasy person always communicates. They always choose us. They always heal. They always grow. They always become available. They're accountable. They become what we need. But the person only exists inside our imagination, not inside reality. So this brings us to the core illusion of the potential trap. We completely confuse hope with intimacy. We think that because we have late night conversations about, why they're emotionally unavailable, we're building closeness. We think that because they cry in front of us and they talk about their childhood, their trauma, their relationship is progressing. So understanding someone's trauma is not the same thing as having a healthy relationship with them. Hope is a future orientated emotion. It lives in the someday. Intimacy is a present tense experience. It requires two people showing up, being vulnerable, being consistent right now in the present. Hope is a drug. It numbs the pain, your current loneliness. But remember, you can't build a home on a foundation of someday. So I'd like to do a quick audit of your relationship. This game we're going to call, remember when you were a kid, you played red light, green light?
Yep.
Did you ever play that game?
Very much so.
Okay. Well, we're going to play an adult version of it, and we're going to look at our relationships, trying to, dissect different patterns and what have you. Ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Oh,
So think about the last month of your relationship. I'm going to read off 2 lists. Count how many match your dynamic. All right, so the green light list. Ready?
Yep.
They match their words with actions. They make plans. They keep them. They show up. They show up when it's inconvenient for them. You feel safe and you feel calm when you think about them. Here's the red light list. They cancel plans last minute, but they say, I miss you so much. They talk about a future vacation, but they never book a ticket. They tell you they love you, but their lifestyle has no room for you. You feel anxious, you feel confused, or like you're constantly walking on eggshells. Okay, now I want you to do the math. If your relationship is 90% red light, but you feel happy because of the potential, is that a thing? The green light in the future. You're high on hope. You're not experiencing intimacy. You're experiencing an addiction to what might be. I want you to think of the person that you're dating or an ex you can't seem to get over. Write down the top 3 traits that you absolutely love about them. Okay, maybe you wrote, they're deeply emotionally intelligent. They're incredibly supportive. They're my soulmate. But here's the twist. Take a look at those 3 traits. Okay? If you're ready to take a look at them. I don't know if you wrote it down fast enough. I'll give you a second.
I'm ready.
All right. So I want you to delete any trait that's based on a promise, a vibe, or something they did in the last 6 months. And I want you to keep a trait on your list. Okay? You have to prove it using a concrete, observable action they took in the last 2 weeks. Okay? You ready? Now here's my question for you. Can you prove their emotional intelligence is from this week? Can you prove that? Or did they just give you a really deep speech about their childhood while avoiding your texts for the last 3 days? Then delete it. Okay? I'll give you a second. All right. So I ask you, what's left on your paper? This is your reality. Everything else you deleted. That was your projection. So this is going to bring us to the core illusion of the potential trap. So we completely confuse hope with intimacy. We think that because we have late night conversations about why they are emotionally unavailable, that we're building closeness. We think that because they cry in front of us and they talk about their childhood trauma, that relationship's progressing. Please hear me when I tell you, understanding someone's trauma is not the same thing as having a healthy relationship with them. This is a big mistake that I made in my past. And another thing that I learned the hard way. Hope is a future-orientated emotion, so it lives in the someday. Intimacy is a present tense experience. It requires two people showing up, being vulnerable, being consistent, right now, not tomorrow. Hope is a drug that numbs the pain of your current loneliness, but you can't build a home on a foundation of someday. Remember that. The difference between love and rescue. So many people confuse these two things. Do you know the difference?
Nope.
No? Okay, well, let's go through the difference. Love says, I care about you. Rescue says, I'll save you. Love says, I support your growth. Rescue says, I'll carry your growth. Love respects responsibility. Rescue absorbs responsibility. When we romanticize potential, we often slide into rescue mode. We start believing if I love them enough, if I explain it differently, if I stay longer, if I sacrifice more, they'll finally become who I know they can be. It's like remodeling, like we discussed this last time, remodeling a kitchen. But growth doesn't happen because someone else wants it. Growth happens when the individual chooses it. So I have some questions for you to ask yourself. And I don't mean to lecture. These are just things that I learned the hard way that I'm hoping that you can avoid. So here's the questions. They will also be in the workbook. Question 1. Am I in love with who they are today? Or am I in love with the person that I hope they'll become? Question 2. If nothing changed for 5 years, would I stay? Question 3. Am I attached to patterns or promises? Am I seeing reality or possibility? Am I accepting behavior or explaining it away? These questions can be really uncomfortable, but they often reveal the truth. So why do we ignore the evidence? Have you ever had friends say, what are you doing? We can all see this isn't working. And then you become defensive. Why do we do that? Do you know?
Nope.
It's because your brain is protecting an investment. The more time that we spend believing in someone's potential, the harder it becomes to admit that we were wrong. Okay? So psychologists call this sunk cost fallacy.
Who?
Sunk cost fallacy.
Too damn big words.
Okay. Well, that's what it's called. I'm here to give you the language so that you can Google, do whatever you want to do to research it yourself and learn.
Where's Wiki when I need it? I'm sitting next to it.
So the sunk cost fallacy, let's give an example. So like I've already spent 3 years. I've spent 10 years. I've sacrificed so much. So instead of accepting reality, we double down on our own hope. Okay, so yep, there's the dopamine of maybe. Now this is where our neuroscience is going to enter this conversation. So the brain doesn't respond to rewards. It responds powerfully to unpredictable rewards. Does that make any sense?
Yep.
Okay. So sometimes you can go and you can, buy something that you want. Yep, that's great. But it's even better when you're not expecting it, right?
Mhm.
Casinos know this, social media knows this, and unfortunately, toxic relationships know this too. So when someone is loving, then distant, then loving, then unavailable, your brain begins chasing the reward, not because the relationship is healthy, but because the uncertainty itself becomes addictive. So you become addicted to the possibility of getting what you need. Breadcrumbing, okay? Breadcrumbing is the ultimate psychological trap. It's when someone gives you just enough attention, affection, or reassurance to keep you from walking away, but never enough to actually feed you. So let's take a second story for an example. We'll call him David. David's 28. He's dating someone who routinely vanishes. They won't text him back for days. He feels sick to his stomach. He's about to give in. He tells himself, if they don't text me by tonight, I'm blocking them. By 11:45 p.m., his phone buzzes. It's a text. It says, thinking of you. Wish you were here. Suddenly, David's brain floods with dopamine. The sickness vanishes. He calls his best friend. They spend 2 hours analyzing the text. What does wish you were here mean? What does it mean when they want you to move in? Does it mean that they're, scared of their feelings? So basically, David's a text archaeologist. He's digging through the dirt of a 9-word text trying to find ancient treasure. So let's look at the math. A crumb, it's not a meal. If you're starving in a restaurant and the waiter drops one single breadcrumb on your plate every 4 days, you don't say, wow, what a great dinner. You say, I'm starving and I need them, I need to leave this restaurant. I'm going home. But in love, we look at a breadcrumb and we imagine the whole bakery. We stay because we're waiting for them to change. We tell ourselves once they get through this busy season at work, once they get over, I don't know, their divorce, they'll give me the full meal. You're waiting for a future payoff from a business that's actively going bankrupt. When in reality, consistently, it lets us down. So our brains don't just say, oh, well, time to leave. Instead, our brain goes into overdrive. Welcome to the torture chamber of rumination. You ever heard of rumination? This is another big word. So rumination is the endless mental loop. It's rereading text from 3 months ago to find clues.
Yeah, but David, Jesus, dude.
No, a lot of us have done this.
Take a damn hint.
A lot of us have done this. A lot of people do this.
I'm not, for a guy's point of view, dude, seriously, yes, I get the love aspect, but come on. She doesn't text you, or he or she, whoever doesn't text you for all that time. It's 11:45 p.m. There are other things you can do. There are websites. There are other things.
There are other fish in the sea.
Yes, but if you're into that toxic relationship, continue. But my Lord,
it's not that people
you need self-respect. Keyword is self in that predicament. Self.
I agree with you, but I think we lie to ourselves and we look for things that aren't there. So, it's checking their Instagram stories to see who they're following. It's staring at the ceiling until 2 a.m, replaying a conversation, thinking if I just said something differently, they would have understood me. So why do we do this to ourselves? It's a simple concept, actually. It sounds more complicated. But honestly, sadly, because your brain hates uncertainty. So your brain thinks that if it can solve a puzzle, it can control the outcome. So rumination, it feels like a problem solving, but it's not. It's just self-torture. So every minute that you spend ruminating on their mixed signals, it's a minute that you spend ignoring the loudest signal of all, their lack of consistent effort. So to break this loop, we have to look at the actual cost. So let's play another game. try to make this somewhat interesting because I know, psychology, neuroscience, all those things. I'm personally fascinated by this, but some people, they find this to be boring. But you need to be here if this is what you're looking at. So let's try to make it a little interesting.
Damn right.
So let's look at the rumination tax. Okay. I want you to be brutally honest with yourself. So how many hours this week did you spend over analyzing this person? Include the time spent texting your friends about them, staring at your phone, waiting for a reply, daydreaming about scenarios where they finally change.
Jesus, too long.
Let's say it's 10 hours this week.
Damn.
So for many other people, it's a lot more. So let's multiply these hours by your hourly wage at your job. So if you make $30 an hour and you spent 10 hours ruminating, you just paid a $300 rumination tax this week.
Damn.
Look at the number. You're paying your valuable, limited, precious emotional energy to someone who isn't even paying attention to you. So you're bankrupt. Your own mental health is, fantasy. Is that person worth that invoice?
Hell no.
No?
If I'm making that damn much?
Giving away that much, really?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
All right, so how do we stop paying the tax?
Crying.
It requires a brutal but beautiful psychological tool. It's called radical acceptance. Here's your next big word. So radical acceptance means that you're looking at the person in front of you today, right now. You're accepting them completely. You stop looking at their potential. You stop looking at their resume. You look at their behavior today. Assume that they're never going to change. Assume this exact version of them with the mixed signals, the late night texts, the emotional walls. This is the final finished product. This is it. Now ask yourself the final question. Knowing that they're going to stay exactly like this forever, do I want this relationship for the next 5 years? Ask yourself.
Hell no.
If the answer is no, it's time to stop loving who they could be, and it's time to start loving yourself enough to walk away. Now we have to ask the hard question. Why do we do this? Why are we drawn to fixers? Often loving potential is a defense mechanism. So think about that. This is kind of an ugly truth, and I hope you don't get offended. But the truth is, if you date someone who's a project, you never have to look at yourself or your own life. You're so busy fixing them that you don't have to face your own fears of failure, your own career stagnation, or your own deep-seated belief that you aren't worthy of love just as you are. It also is a control tactic. If you're the one saying to them, they will never leave you, right? You feel safe. But this is an illusion. You're hiding behind their chaos. So the most important relationship you can have is obviously with yourself. And many of us that grew up in traumatic backgrounds, we didn't learn that. So something that people rarely discuss is this. Many of us don't just romanticize other people's potential. We romanticize our own. We keep saying things like, someday I'll write this book. I'll make this song. Someday I'll start healing. Someday I'll pursue this dream. Someday I'll become myself. Potential without action becomes self-abandonment. And at some point, we must stop admiring who we could become and start becoming who we want to be. So we're about done here, but one more thing. The grief that nobody talks about. Okay. I've listened to, not bagging on anybody's stuff, but I've read hundreds of self-help books. I've listened to tons of podcasts. Maybe it exists, maybe I didn't find it, but I feel like it's really not discussed, and it's an important thing to talk about. So one of the hardest things in healing is grieving potential. Okay. You're not grieving necessarily what happened. You're grieving what never did happen or occur. So maybe the father who never became a father, the mother who never became emotionally available, the partner who never became consistent, the friend who never became, I don't know, trustworthy, the relationship that always had promise but never had follow through. This is a unique grief because you're mourning a future that never existed, and that gets a little tricky. So I hope your takeaway could be, potential is beautiful, it's inspiring, it's hopeful. Potential is not reality. A healthy life is built on what consistently exists, not what occasionally appears. You don't need to stop believing in people, but you need to stop hoping, in someone that you don't sacrifice your present life for someone else's future possibility. Because sometimes the most loving thing that you can do is accept someone exactly as they are. And then you decide whether that's enough is up to you. I hope this put some clarity on this conversation, and I hope it wasn't too harsh. Anything you want to add before we close?
No, it could have been more harsh, but you're the nice one.
Okay, well, Unapologetically Reborn it's only been around for a few months, but
5 or 6.
the basis of this podcast is to give you the language so you know where you are and you learn new terms and you can Google those and, get better in touch with yourself and look at situations that maybe you weren't quite sure how to look at or what have you. It's different for different people. But the whole point and purpose of the podcast is to be straight with you and to serve you things that, unfortunately, many of them I've walked through, and not saying, know it all or anything like that, but things that I wish somebody would have told me. And some of those things aren't pretty and they might not sound nice. And I don't want to offend anyone with these truths, but if you're fed saltines, you're going to starve and you're never going to get what you need as far as learning and things like that. So hopefully this gives some clarification on that. I hope you guys have a wonderful, fabulous week, and I hope you were able to learn something, take something from this, and we'll see you on the next one. Remember, this is where survival ends and choices begin.